Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the second Voices from the Heart event. We feel honored to have such wonderful presenters this evening and hope you will feel the same. We just heard Donna Hertz and Tal Mashiach. We will hear from them throughout the evening. Born in Jerusalem to a family of musicians, Donna is based in Brooklyn. And while her initial training was classical, she eventually found her creative home in different musical styles, primarily combining jazz, R&B, and folkloric styles of the Middle East. Tal Mashiach is a Grammy-nominated multi-instrumentalist, performer, and composer from Israel and based in Brooklyn. He combines his skills to create one of the most prominent and original voices in the world jazz music scene. And now let's welcome Jonathan Kuttab. Jonathan, a Palestinian international human rights attorney who puts his Christian faith and principles of nonviolence to action, will address some of the possibilities for peace and reconciliation with justice. Jonathan Kuttab.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think these are very difficult times for all of us. I hope you recognize that the situation did not start on October the 7th and is not likely to end whenever the Israeli operation in Gaza ends, and however it ends. If anything, I think the events of October 7 and what followed it present a real crisis and a real closed alley that challenges a lot of traditional thinking about the Israeli-Palestinian situation. And I have spent a lot of time, frankly, thinking about this and trying to see how we can reach some kind of way to deal with it that is not a zero-sum situation where every gain by one side is a loss to the other, and every pain by one side somehow is a victory for the other. For many years, I thought that the solution would be a two-state solution, going back to the 67 borders, allowing Palestinians a state in 22% of Palestine in return for giving up basically their national claims to 78% of the land. And I know that many people still talk about the two-state solution as being the likely possible outcome. And it took me a long time to realize that that is no longer possible, mostly because of the settlements that were set up in the occupied territories. There's about 700,000 to 800,000 Jewish settlers in that 22% that was intended to be a Palestinian state. But more importantly, there are real changes on the ground, system of roads, structures, laws, administrations, and psychological integration of these settlements into the state of Israel. There has also been a I would say, a clearer intention for Israel to maintain itself as a Jewish state in the land that has made the idea of two states living side by side no longer really feasible. In a way, we have to go back to the drawing boards and think of what would be a possible solution. Of course, the events of October 7 really highlighted the basic differences. The fact that there are those in Israel who basically want to maintain control and authority over all the land of Israel. And there are those on the Palestinian side who also say, Palestine Arabiya, Palestine is Arab. And they do not want to give up their claim to all of Palestine. In a way, that has always been the case. If we're going to be honest with ourselves, we have to recognize, again, without making any judgments and without in any way implying that the two sides are equal or symmetrical in any way whatsoever, there's basically two groups living in Haaretz, in the land. Each group thinks it is theirs. One group, the Zionist group, says, this is Jewish land. I'm Eretz Israel, I'm Israel. Whether it's because God gave it to us, whether we believe in him or not. Ben Gurion used to say, I don't believe in God, but I believe he gave us this land. Whether it's Balfour, whether it's the United Nations, whether it's power, we conquered it, we won, it's ours. Whether it's need, psychological need, we need to have a Jewish state, whatever reason. They believe this place is Jewish, and then it has to be as Jewish as France is French. We have to be the dominant Jewish power in all the land. And there's another group, Palestinians, who say, Palestine Arabiya, Palestine is Arab. This is our homeland. The Zionist movement is a settler colonial movement. These people came from all over the world trying to create something out of nothing. This land was not empty. We were here. And the only way this can be Jewish is by pushing us out and taking our place. So these two movements, frankly, have been at each other's throat for almost a century now. And we have been caught in a zero-sum situation. Every dunam of land, every acre of land that is lost by the Arabs or gained by the Zionists, and every new soul that is either born or who immigrates in is one victory to one side and is a loss to the other. I hope we will at least accept that we are all human beings, that no group has a greater claim or demand on humanity than the other. And if that's true, then we have to find a way to live together rather than fight and try and dominate and try and delegitimize and try and kick out or disenfranchise or oppress the other group. And I will tell you very openly, if this is what Palestinians want, they cannot have it. There will never be a Palestine Arabiya because 7 million people living there are not Arab and they're going nowhere. And they consider it their home. But by the same time, you can't have a Jewish state there because at least 7 million people living there are not Jews. And they're going nowhere either. So how can these two groups live together? Partition, the idea of a two-state solution, made some sense at one point, I suppose. But ultimately it fails, because there are some Jews who think that this is important to us. This is Hebron, where the fathers are, and this is Jerusalem, where Zion is. You can't tell me that this is not ours. And there are Palestinians who will say, you know, Jaffa, Haifa, Ascalon. You can't tell me this is no longer mine. Somehow we need to find a formula. So I decided to see if it's possible. The good news is I think it is possible. And I'll start with our part. Why do I want a Palestinian state? What does a Palestinian state give me?
Peace.
And we write down all the things that this state can give me. Gives me self-determination, the idea to participate, gives me a center for my life and nationalism, gives me freedom to move and go and come, gives me the ability to take in my cousins, my refugees who need to come home and who are not comfortable in Syria or Lebanon or wherever they are, who want at least to know that they have a homeland, who at least they have the option of coming. And I also asked my Israeli friends and my Jewish friends, why do you want a Jewish state? What does a Jewish state mean? How can a state be Jewish anyway? And one rabbi told me, when I asked him that question, why do you want a Jewish state? What does a Jewish state do for you? And he said, well, after everything that happened to us, I want a state where any Jew, anywhere, no questions asked, can go and live and be able to defend himself. So I was inspired, and I told him, well, maybe I can give you something better. How about a state where any Jew, anywhere, anytime, no questions asked, can go and live where he doesn't need to defend himself because nobody's out to get him? Is that possible? I said, yes. You have to only give up one thing, and that is exclusivity. That state can be a Jewish state. It can follow a Jewish calendar and close on the Sabbath and have a Jewish character to it, but it'll also be an Arab state. And for me also, it can be an Arab state, but it will not be exclusively Arab. It'll be Arab and Jewish. And somehow, if we can do that, that state can be a better state, a better Arab state than all the other Arab states because of the strong Jewish component. And it can be a better Jewish state than the state of Israel is today because it has that pluralistic Arab component to it as well. Now, sounds a bit idealistic, so I decided to go into the details. How can you have a state that is both Jewish and Arab? And the answer is yes, you can. Yes, you can. So I tried to work out the details. I wrote a little book called Beyond the Two-State Solution, which you can obtain. I hope somebody will put in the chat box how you can obtain it. You can download it for free if you don't want to order it and pay for it. You can download it for free. It details how a state can, in fact, address the needs of both sides, all their needs, really, except for exclusivity. That will not be allowed. It needs a lot of work because it needs to have structures that will ensure, number one, that it is a democratic state, but that democracy doesn't mean that 51% is allowed to oppress the 49%. That the rights of the individual and the rights of each minority, each community, are protected regardless of whether they are 40% or 60%. It has to have a constitution. Israel today doesn't have one. And the constitution has to be clear in its protection of both communities, regardless of who wins the last election and how many members in parliament do they have. There has to be an independent court system, as well as a constitutional court system, where the constitutional court has at least 2 Jewish and at least 2 Arab judges, and where decisions have to be taken by 4 out of 5, not just 3 out of 2. There has to be structures that ensure the protection of the rights of the individual as well as the minority, again, regardless of who won the last election and how many members in the parliament or the Knesset they have. So I wrote up that vision of mine, and I made it available in Arabic and in Hebrew as well as in English. Because, you know, sometimes people say one thing in one language to one group and say another in another group, depending on who's their audience. And I wanted to be clear that this has to be the same in all languages and address everybody and their needs. So one of the biggest problems was the whole issue of demography. Who's going to be 51%? Who is going to control the population? And the answer is neither. Each side will have a full right of return, but whoever has 51 or 49 or 40 or 60% doesn't matter, because their rights are protected under this system that I talk about. Because democracy doesn't just mean 51% has the right to trample over the minority. Not to oppress them, not to sideline them, not to disenfranchise them, not to kick them out of the country, not to take away their rights. All rights have to be maintained. And then another problem I was told was going to be security. How do you deal with security? How do you deal with the fact that both groups are so traumatized and so afraid of the others? And I was thinking primarily of the Jewish side, but also the Arab side, which has been traumatized as well. And so I provided a number of provisions. I thought they were interesting. One of them is we'll make the Minister of Defense, the head of the Air Force, Army, Navy, and nuclear power, always to be a Jewish person with an Arab deputy, and all other positions in the army to be on the basis of merit, and those who do not want to serve in the army will have to do national service. But you will also allow permanently that the head of police and internal security will always be a Palestinian Arab with a Jewish deputy, because we have had our experience also of being oppressed internally. So the Jewish fears and the Arab fears are addressed somewhat. More importantly, I think, from my perspective, is that 10% of the defense budget of this new entity that I am imagining will always be spent on what I call real security, which is on projects that promote cooperation between the two communities, understanding of the language and culture and the history of both communities, of having joint projects, of dealing with past traumas, because the biggest danger to Jewish Israelis today, it doesn't come from Iran or Turkey or Afghanistan or the Muslim or the Arab world. It comes from ordinary Palestinians, what I call 12-year-old schoolgirl with a pair of scissors in her pocket that she wants to stick into somebody, and she doesn't care for her life or their life because she feels oppressed and she wants to do something about it. To remove that bitterness, that hatred, you really need to address the reasons for it. That is how you deal with security, not by another F-16 squadron or a bigger bomb than the 2,000-pound bombs that you are dropping here and there. Real security is not achieved by more military might, but by addressing the feeling of injustice and bitterness and hatred, which is being fed, by the way, these days in huge ways. So I also deal with the issues of religion and the role of religion in public life and in courts. And I propose a civil court system that works parallel to the existing religious court system. I don't know how many of you realize it, but you have far more religious freedom in America as Jews than you do in Israel. Because in Israel, the Zionist movement under Ben-Gurion made a special deal with the Orthodox Jews, giving them exclusive rights over personal status matters for all Jews in Eretz Yisrael. Whether they are Reform or conservative or secular, they are under the authority of, the exclusive authority of the Orthodox rabbinical courts. So I provided for a parallel system so that anybody who wants to use the religious system of their particular denomination can do so, and it will be respected by the states. But anybody who doesn't, whether it's because they don't believe in God or they don't like their particular denomination or because they are in an intermarriage, interfaith marriage, or because they want to be free from their own particular religious community, they have an opportunity, just like in the United States. You can have a civil marriage or you can have a church wedding if you want. And if you don't like your church wedding, you want a divorce and your church doesn't provide for divorce, you can still get a civil divorce. You're not tied with your particular community's religious affairs. And anyway, you read the book. It's a short book, and it has a little executive summary at the back for those who don't like to read a long book. And I've offered people, give me ideas. We need to break out of this mold of zero-sum solutions, where every inch I get, you lose, and every inch you get, I lose. We need to come to a realization that it's our fate to live together in this one country. And I say that again, not that I think there is any symmetry between the two, or that they are equally morally or historically or legally entitled to this land. And if you notice, I have not spent any time talking about international law, violations of international law, about history, about settler colonialism, about the background. It's not that I can't or won't, it's just that it's not helpful and useful. We must start from a different point of view. We must find a way to share this land. And we cannot do that if we hang on to ideologies which at the very root negate the other. At the very root negate the rights of the other group. At their very root, finds in the very existence of the other an existential threat to one's own community. Anyway, this is what I try to do. And I offered this as a challenge. Can this work? Why not? Can we make it work? Is this something that's worth working for and working towards, rather than hanging on to our own ideologies, which require us to continue to fight and fight and fight forever? I think if there's any lesson that was learned, should have been learned, it wasn't. If there's any lesson of October 7, is that military power alone will never provide security. That the weaker side, no matter how weak, no matter how crushed, how tightly controlled, in every possible way, will always be able to break out with disastrous results for everybody concerned. I don't think Israelis will ever be safe again unless they make peace with the Palestinians. If they seek total victory and complete domination of the Palestinians, it will not work. With every possible advantage on their side, they have failed and will fail and will continue to fail until they seek peace. And a peace that's based on justice, not on overwhelming power, not on controlling the other side, not on deterrence that will not allow the other side to ever fight or stand against it. This is the challenge that is behind us, and this is what I offer as a way out of this dilemma that we are in. I think my 30 minutes are up, and I'm certainly open to hear challenges, discussion, questions to what I have said. I don't know how, Sharon, you want to handle
yes. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. Your words ring true for me, as well as I'm sure they do for many others. So I'm going to take questions from the chat. I'll try to get as many questions as I can within the allotted time. Okay, just give me a few minutes to have the questions put in.
This is the time for anyone with questions to go to their chat and enter any questions that they have, and they will be relayed through Sharon to our speaker.
Okay, here we go. Have you had any reaction from Israelis to your book or to your ideas?
I've made the book available in Hebrew. Well, last time I was there, I spoke at Haifa University to 2 groups of students. I've tried to have meetings with people, more public meetings, but everybody was too busy with the democracy demonstrations to even want to talk about this. One of the biggest answers that I got, one of the biggest reaction was, it's too idealistic. This is too idealistic a vision. And my answer to them in Hebrew was, Im tirtzu ein zu agada. If you wish it, it is not a legend or a dream. Yes, it is a vision, and yes, it is idealistic, but it is certainly something worth working towards.
Let's go on to this question. Oh, did I interrupt you?
No.
Okay. Somebody asks, well, somebody says, this is such a hopeful vision. How is it possible to build awareness and support for what you propose?
Okay. First of all, we must acknowledge that what we now have isn't working. Because as long as you think it's working fine, why should you give up? Many of my Palestinian friends said, why would Israelis ever do that? Why would they accept such a sharing of power on the basis of equality? Because when I list what's important to Palestinians as opposed to Israelis, equality was at the very top of the list. And it's a serious objection, because people who have privilege don't like to give up their privilege. And to talk to them about privilege is almost oppressive. If I'm a slave holder and you come and talk to me about equality, you're trying to take away my property. I own this man or woman, etc. You want to eliminate slavery? You want to make me the same as this other person? You're taking something away from me. And the state of Israel today gives privilege and advantage to Jews over non-Jews. So most people who have privilege don't easily give it up unless they are forced either by internal or external factors to give up that privilege. So it is a problem. That's one obstacle, I think, that is in the face of any peaceful solution. The tremendous imbalance of power between the two sides. Many Israelis feel they have everything they want. Why do they need peace with the Palestinians until something like October 7th comes? And then instead of saying, how do we achieve peace? No, they double down and says we have to push them more, and we have to use more force and more deterrence so that they will never think again of doing something like this. Deterrence doesn't work. As long as people feel that they are oppressed, they will find a way. They will find a way to rise up against their oppressors. And when they do, it's ugly, barbaric, awful, but it's to be expected.
Thank you. Here's one. In your book, you talk about the importance of Jewish and Palestinian activists working together for mutual liberation.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any examples of Jewish-Palestinian partnerships in the Holy Land that you think have been successful?
There are a few, but there are also obstacles. For example, there's the breaking the silence. There's the circle of the bereaved. There's the that's people who lost. There's combatants for peace. There are a few examples. Unfortunately, there is a lot of what I call fake peace that has given peace a bad name. Fake cooperation that many Palestinians reject as normalization. If you just bring 5 Palestinian kids and 5 Jewish kids to sing Kumbaya, one verse in Hebrew and one verse in Arabic, and then that one group goes back to the refugee camp and the other group goes back to do its army reserve duty, that doesn't work. You have to work on real, genuine cooperation, and that is possible. There are such groups that are around that are doing this kind of work.
Thank you. The ideologies on both sides are deeply held. What steps can be taken to begin to break down their commitments to their present ideologies and catch the vision of everyone living in peace together?
Okay. Well, I think that the ideologies have to be tweaked, not totally abandoned. On the Jewish side, for example, I understand that there were all kinds of Zionisms. They were not all nationalistic. They were not all as tribal as the current form of Zionism that seems to have taken control. There were some Zionists, Ahad Ha'am and others, Martin Buber and others, who thought that they could have a Jewish Arab state or a binational state, or that statehood isn't the answer. For them, Jewish life was more important than exclusivity. So there you have to tweak your Zionism to accommodate the people already living there, not to dominate them, oppress them, or ethnically cleanse them. And on the Palestinian side, I think there have been at times talk about secular democratic state that now needs to be revived. That was frankly bullied out of us, beaten out of us. Don't talk about a secular democratic state. It means you don't accept a Jewish state. It means you want to kill us all. It means you want to drive us into the sea, that you don't accept a Jewish state. So we were, in a sense, the PLO was forced to move away from that kind of vision and to talk about a two-state solution, which is based on separation rather than cooperation and collaboration. So I think Palestinians will have to rediscover that treasured idea of a shared life rather than a domination. We will dominate in the Palestinian state and we'll let you dominate in the Jewish state of Israel. No, we have to share. The land is too small, way too small to have that kind of separation, and to enforce it by walls and checkpoints and constant separation, hafrada, does not help. We need to find ways to live together rather than to live separately.
Okay, here's an interesting question. Explain how international law can work if divine law trumps it, and whose divine law?
Divine law always trumps human law. Who am I to say anything if God says otherwise? If God tells you something, you have to follow what God says rather than what people say. I think we need for religious people to step up and say, this is not what God orders us. And you can. I mean, there's enough in Hebrew scriptures to talk about equality for the stranger who's living in your midst. You even have to give him land. The tribes were instructed to give shares in land for the strangers among them. The Old Testament has some good teachings about justice for the vulnerable and for the weak. And there's a lot in Islamic and Christian traditions also that talks about our being God's children and about equality and about justice and about fairness. So we need to, in a way, use religion on our side, because the other side, as I said, have used religion. Even those who don't believe in God are using the Bible and religion to justify their right-wing fascist nationalist claims. I think we can move. See, the beauty about international law is that it puts God aside. Even though most of those who wrote the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for example, were deeply religious people, but they used secular language to apply to everybody. Religion can be part of the solution. For me, it certainly is, rather than part of the problem.
Thank you. We have a few minutes left, so I'm going to try hard to select maybe one or two questions. Someone says, thank you so much. How would you recommend the Palestinian people's drive for revenge that will surely be inflamed by Israel's assault in Gaza be turned around?
Yeah, it's hard to deal with the desire for revenge because it's actually natural. And in fact, a lot of what was done on October 7 was a feeling of revenge by Palestinians against the siege and against the military rule and against the oppression. So we can get caught up in that cycle of revenge and counter revenge and keep fighting and keep killing each other forever. It's one possibility. I'm trying to break out of it and say that there is another path. And for those who think that this is not possible, I think they're wrong. Historically, for 13 centuries, since the times of the Crusades until about a century ago, with the rise of Zionism, Jews, Christians, and Muslims have lived together in relative security and peace, and we can get along together. War is not the natural state of being for people. Peace is. So we must break through this cycle of revenge and counter revenge. But you don't do it with Netanyahu's plan for the day after, that I will continue to dominate. I will continue to be in charge. I will continue to be the boss. There will not be any kind of Palestinian state. There will not be any kind of Palestinian self-rule. We will be dominant. We will be in power. With that kind of thinking, yeah, you're right. You cannot do it.
So I think that will be our last question for the evening, Jonathan. And again, thank you so very much for your words.
You're most welcome.
It's an intergenerational Jewish organization for peace and justice in Israel-Palestine. So welcome, Marcy and Mari.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having us both. So Marcy and I are here from IfNotNow, and I want to talk a little bit about what IfNotNow does. If perhaps you've listened to Jonathan speak and feel inspired and you want to be part of the cross-Jewish and Palestinian liberation movement in the Holy Land, and what can you do? And one of the things you can do is join IfNotNow. I guess before I talk too much about that, I just want to thank Jonathan so much. I'm actually a fan of his book and have read his book, and it's wonderful. And I really, really recommend reading it if you are someone who, like me, is maybe an optimist and is someone that wants very badly for equality and justice and peace in the Holy Land, but are maybe a little bit finicky on, well, how do we get there? What are the details? I find that I'm often the person in organizing space going, yes, that all sounds great. How do we get there? And so this book was really wonderful for me, that Jonathan has done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of thinking of what would a state look like? How do you share this land? How is there true equality and liberation? So I so recommend you pick it up. So Jonathan is actually the brother of Sam, and Sam is someone that IfNotNow organizes with a lot, Sam Kuttab. And we do actions together that Marcy is going to talk about a little bit later, but something that I wanted to bring up that has been very sort of moving to me in doing this joint Jewish-Palestinian liberation work is Sam will often come into a space and call us cousins. We'll say, Jews and Palestinians were cousins. And I think it's a very helpful mentality if you perhaps, like I have been in the past, you sort of have a tribal mentality of who is your family, and to have this very expansionist idea of reworking the definition of family to include what is the tribe? The tribe is not just Jews, the tribe is also Palestinians, and we're cousins. And it's just been an incredibly helpful sort of mindset as we move forward and talk seriously about what a solution would look like in the Holy Land. So I'm the comms lead for IfNotNow Philadelphia. I'm also a former Masa Olam alumni. And I bring that up because I came to my position on Zionism over time. And I think that sometimes when people hear about If Not Now, there's a sense of, oh, I don't know if I'm ready to, I don't know if I want to give up Zionism. I feel very strongly about Eretz Israel. Like, I don't know if this is for me. And so before I go too deep into what we are and how we organize, I just sort of want to offer an olive branch of come try, come organize with us. We're not asking you to give up anything, but there is a different path than the one that I think that we as Jews in the United States have been offered. And If Not Now has been just like an incredible bridge for me as an activist to get to walk down with the Jewish community. So what is If Not Now? So if you are moved by Jonathan's words and you want to do organizing in the United States with American Jews, If Not Now is a movement of American Jews, and we are organizing our community to end US support for Israel's apartheid system and demand equality, justice, and a thriving future for all Palestinians and Israelis. We came out of Operation Protective Edge in 2014. So that was sort of, there was this big movement moment where a lot of American Jews were very horrified by what was happening for Operation Protective Edge in 2014 and began to come together and organize. You probably will know this by our name, but we are inspired by Rabbi Hillel's 3 questions. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? We are a big tent on Zionism. So once again, if you're someone that maybe you don't identify as an anti-Zionist, this work can still be for you. Sort of as Jonathan says, Zionism, maybe you're willing to tweak your Zionism. Maybe there are concessions that you hadn't considered making, and now you're interested in exploring what a just future would look like. And so we really invite you to come explore that with us. Liberation is a long game. And it's good to have friends, and it's good to have people along the road with you. So what will If Not Now be doing sort of for the rest of the year? So you might have seen us, if you're in Philly, we've been doing a lot of ceasefire actions. We're going to continue to do ceasefire actions until a lasting ceasefire is reached. But a lot of our work this year will also be working within Jewish community to sort of hold space for visions beyond apartheid and a future in the Holy Land. And then targeting AIPAC is the other big thing we're going to be doing this year. So discussing AIPAC's role in Christian Zionism, weapons manufacturing, sort of the myth of Jewish safety as it relates to AIPAC. So we're going to be doing actions about that, and we're going to be doing messaging about that. And that's something that you can get involved with this year. In terms of like sort of like the teams you could consider yourself being on, so we have the partnerships team. Our big partnership right now is the Prayers for Peace Alliance, which is a partnership we have with Jonathan's brother, Sam, and we do leafleting every other weekend at churches around Philadelphia, calling for peace in the Holy Land, calling for a lasting ceasefire. There's also digicoms and comms. So I work in comms. So if you're someone that's a good writer, we would love to have you. If you're someone that has a vision of how messaging works, we would love to have you. There's Jewish outreach, there's actions. Maybe you're someone that is, you've been doing actions for 40 years and you would love to help us with that. That would be great. We have the political education team. And then we have one of my favorite teams, which is JBAUP, which is Jewish Boomers Against the Occupation in Palestine. Perhaps you're someone that you don't really like being a part of all these group chats, but you do want to get involved and you are a Jewish boomer. We have an excellent team that is excited to work with you. And then I think I'm going to turn it over to Marcy to talk about some of our actions. Marcy has actually been in If Not Now for years longer than I have, and so can speak to how our actions have evolved in the last couple of years.
Thank you, Mari.
Thank you. Thank you, Mari. I get Sharon, let me,
You're on.
all right, great, thanks. All right, hi, hold on. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to look at my notes and I'm messing up I've only been on Zoom for how many years? There we go. Okay. All right. So I'm honored to be part of this event where we're learning and in conversation around Israel-Palestine. As Sharon and Mari said, my name is Marcy Boroff. I am a member of Mishkan Shalom. I'm the chair of our Israel-Palestine committee, and I'm also a member of the If Not Now Partnerships Committee. And I want to actually just sort of say something quick about If Not Now that and I'm probably not getting the whole picture, but they have this image of what they're trying to do. There's a lot of things in the United States that are holding up apartheid and the occupation in Israel that the United States is doing to hold it up. One is the American Jewish community. The other is like the arms deals. The other is Christian Zionism, but If Not Now, as a group of mostly Jewish people, what we can do is knock down that pillar of the American Jewish community and the ongoing support by educating people and raising awareness. And I really love that image of just then it'll sort of be tilted and maybe the other things will knock down. Because that's what we as Jews have the power about, talking to our family and getting out there and sharing the words of that. And I also want to, before I go back to If Not Now, I want to welcome you from and thank you for coming from Mishkan Shalom. It is really important for Mishkan to be able to host events like this. And our community includes, members with different perspectives on what is happening and what the future may be in Israel-Palestine. And we strive to make sure that everyone feels not only welcomed at Mishkan, but feels like an honored member of the congregation and also feels, has the ability to come up and say, I want to do an event on this. I want to bring this speaker in and we'll support them. And so it's great that we're able to be one of the sponsors for this event, that the Voices in the Heart came to us. It has been, more challenging doing this work as a part of the Jewish community in the last 4 months, but we are continue to work hard at it. And, we just want to make sure that we are happy to sponsor this event. But as a congregation, we have not aligned with any one group, but at the same time, our members have aligned with many groups, and also what is happening in Israel, what has happened, and what the future is, because we are a Jewish community, is really integrated into all we do. Our rabbi, our synagogue, we were sponsored Ceasefire Shabbat. Our rabbi signed a petition that the part of the Prayers for Peace has done, and many other petitions. So again, welcome from Mishkan Shalom. And as many Mishkan members, I'm involved in many different organizations. So I'm also a member of If Not Now and on the Partnerships Committee. I'm just going to talk about some of the actions that If Not Now has done. And why they're doing them, again, to influence the stance that the U.S. government takes regarding the possible future, looking towards the possible future that Jonathan spoke about, and what we can do to change the ongoing American Jewish community support of what the U.S. government is doing. So from its founding back in 2014 during Operation Protective Age, If Not Now has drawn on Jewish ritual to convey what the moral necessity of ending the occupation and the ongoing wars in Israel-Palestine. And through these actions, we're bringing the crisis of consciousness into full public view. So participating in these events, you're with community, there's Jewish ritual, we're reaching out to other members of our community, Jewish, non-Jewish elected officials, to let them know that we need to come together to struggle for mutual liberation and an end to apartheid. So the first action that took place in 2014 during Operation Protective Edge was a public mourners Kaddish, where people came together in multiple cities to mourn the loss of Palestinian and Israeli life. So you can see from the beginning the importance of ritual. So I got involved in If Not Now probably around 2018. At that point, it was mostly younger people, and I got involved through my daughter inviting me to join an action with her in 2018 in Washington, D.C. to protest Trump's moving the embassy to Jerusalem. It seems like such a long time ago and a simple time ago, but that happened, and now we are here in the midst of this war. And since then, I had been involved in a few different actions, including protesting the annexation of the West Bank, probably back in 2019. So then, IfNotNow was founded by mostly young people, people in their 20s, and they were getting older, and they were getting older members. And back in 2020, they did a workshop. IfNotNow members invited an elder, whether they're rabbi, a relative, a parent, someone they met in an action, to join them in this multi-part workshop so they could figure out how they can bring in more elders and really create an intergenerational, multi-generational movement. So one of the conversations that stayed with me when I was doing that training is there was a dialogue between an IfNotNow member and her father. That was who she invited to participate in the workshop, around the question about whether or not Israel is good or bad for the Jewish people. And one of the things that I observed and, was listening to them dialogue was the respect that they had, the love they had for each other, being they were father and daughter. And even though they came at that question from a different point of view and what their sense was, their connection to the Jewish community and to this land was central to how they shared their beliefs. And through my own work and my own learning, I know that the Palestinian community has that same deep connection to the land, to their religion, to their community, to the people. And that just, makes what Jonathan was saying so true, that we need to honor all of these deep connections. So I'll talk about some of the more recent actions that have happened. And also these actions, I have to say to people I know, Marius was trying to say, come check them out. They are so well organized. They're so clear about their goal. And there's great communication, all right? It's through WhatsApp and other means of communication, but they're just very well organized. There is often sometimes a risk of arrest, and it's very clear what you do if you want to have a risk of arrest and what you don't do if you don't want a risk of arrest. And if you decide you want to risk arrest, there's also a whole process there, who you call, what you do. You have a phone number written, the training is connected to it. So I'm really impressed with IfNotNow and proud to be a member because of the way they take on what they're doing.
Marcy,
Yeah.
we're gonna have to go to the Q&A now. Sorry
Okay.
to interrupt.
No problem.
Okay. Thank you both so very much. So now we'll have about 10 minutes for Q&A. So make sure you put your questions into the chat. By the way, we're going to have a slide with all the contact information for tonight's presenters at the end of our program. No questions?
There's one question, if I can pass it on.
Sure.
And that is, are the phrases settler colonialism and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free in the rhetoric of IfNotNow? The questioning party finds them incredibly self-defeating for everyone.
So I can speak to this from a messaging perspective. So that's not messaging that we use. There are events that sometimes IfNotNow will be at where other speakers or other groups will use that messaging. We try very hard to be as big tent for the Jewish community as possible. So we are, as I've said before, we are sort of agnostic on Zionism. So if you're someone that you feel very strongly like there are certain types of messaging that you find inflammatory, IfNotNow works very hard to sort of not use that type of messaging. So yeah, I would say that if you come to an IfNotNow event, you will probably be spared this. But then again, if it is an event with multiple groups of people, that's not something we have a ton of control over.
Thank you.
And I'll just add in the right when I quite didn't get to what everything I was going to say, but a lot of the events, the actions are in partnership with other organizations, or if not now, members will go to events that are organized by other people. So, you know, you could hear different things that you might feel uncomfortable with, but that's what happens with partnerships and coalitions. But if not now, when you're in a planning meeting, I think it is very open and, you know.
Who are some of the organizations that you interact with?
Marcy, do you want to speak to this because I know we just have this big partnership that has been developed that we're working very closely with, which is the Prayers for Peace Alliance. I can talk about that, but I think you know more about it than I do.
So actually, IfNotNow was approached by, as Mari said, Sam Kuttab, who lives in Philadelphia, and to partnership. So this is a small partnership. Well, it's big, but small, it's IfNotNow, and it's I think individual Palestinian Americans that live in Philadelphia. And IfNotNow has been working very closely with them and going to local churches, calling the churches, standing outside the churches, sometimes going in and just asking people to pray for Gaza, to pray for the release of the hostages, and to call their local representatives, because that's how we're going to make this ceasefire happen. Unfortunately, all the calls to Dwight Evans have not made a difference, but we got to keep on trying. And then through that, we've also have a petition that we've had close to 100 faith leaders sign that Prayers for Peace is doing. That it actually, I have it urges our elected representatives to seek an immediate and lasting ceasefire in Gaza and pursue through diplomatic means the release of the hostages and a future based on peace, justice, and equal rights for all people in the Holy Land. And also, don't we, Mari, some of the protests or the actions, IfNotNow participates in, but so does JVP and Philadelphia Palestine Coalition.
Yeah, we have participated in those in the past. I would say I think sometimes in Jewish communities, there is a greater suspicion of Jewish Voice for Peace sometimes. And I do sort of say that, Jewish Voice for Peace is very strictly anti-Zionist. And then IfNotNow, as I've said, is a big tent on Zionism. So if you're someone that maybe Jewish Voice for Peace feels like not your jam, but you're interested in working in the anti-occupation space, I think IfNotNow is a really good place to come sort of find your people. If you're like, JVP is too far for me, those are not the Jews I want to organize with, IfNotNow is a sort of a bigger tent for you to come hang out in.
Thank you. I think we have a couple more minutes.
There's additional questions on the other side here, and it really deals with language. There's two different people asking about the term apartheid and what impact that has in all of this. And then someone asking, and I think we can combine these, what are the words how does one break down barriers when words are so offensive? And are there, in fact, words that Jews might use that would be offensive to Palestinians also? The basket of words, if you guys can comment.
Yeah, I think that's it's a very interesting question about messaging. And I think that IfNotNow does its best to sort of straddle as many worlds as possible and tries to sort of be a bridge. Some of the messaging that is not necessarily IfNotNow specific, but that I turn to a lot is the sort of thought leadership for Standing Together, which is a grassroots organization in Israel that is joint Palestinian Arab and Jewish Israeli coalition. They've been doing a lot of the on-the-ground ceasefire work in Israel-Palestine, and they have a pamphlet that is sort of their theory of change. And in their theory of change, what they say is we assume no one is evil. We assume that everyone is acting in good faith as much as we can assume that. And our job is to make the messaging broad enough that everyone can find space in it. And that's a lot of times the sort of messaging we use in If Not Now. So we do use apartheid as the term for what is happening in Israel-Palestine. I will give you my email, and I'm happy to talk more about that specifically, but generally apartheid as different rights for different groups of people, separation of different groups of people in the Holy Land. A lot of times I will find people coming to me saying, well, Arab Jews within Israel have the same rights as Jewish Israelis, and we're in fact talking about the whole of Israel-Palestine, and
Sharon?
that is not the case. But anyway, yes, I'm happy to talk more about that if you want to talk to me one-on-one about messaging. But in general, our assumption for messaging for If Not Now is that no one is evil. We're trying to use non-inflammatory language so that we can sort of all get on the same page in our pursuit of justice.
Say it out loud.
And I think also just, language is hard and it shuts down people if you use things like apartheid or say from the river to the sea and anti-Zionism. And I think many of us are on a journey of when we're comfortable with those words, and some days more comfortable than other days or some situations. And I think, we need to have conversations about why someone may identify as an anti-Zionist or a non-Zionist or a Zionist or a progressive Zionist, and why someone may use the word apartheid. And I think we need to create more opportunities for learning so we can understand why some people use that language, and more opportunities for discussion, because we're not going to get to the future where there is equality for all unless we have more conversation and more discussion, because the way we're going now isn't working for anyone.
And so thank you both. Before we move to our last musical interlude, one final question. Is it clear that calls for ceasefire include a demand that Hamas as well as Israel cease hostilities?
Yes.
That's what a
those are-
ceasefire would be, right?
Yeah.
Great. Passing on people's questions. So
No,
Sharon will be.
I think it's hard because some people will say that, well, there was a ceasefire on October 6th, but there was also oppression and occupation. So we can't go back to October 6th. That wasn't working either. Today isn't working, but what existed in Israel-Palestine on October 6th, there was apartheid, there was an occupation, there was ongoing oppression. So we need to really look forward to the future that Jonathan described, that if not now, that many of us want, or many of us try to think, and everyone should have opportunity, and everyone should live with peace and equity and equality. And it's not going to be easy.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. And I also want to mention that if anyone is interested in getting into the If Not Now Boomers group, please email Rachel Martin 1869@gmail.com. Okay, before we conclude tonight's event, thank you so very much to all of our presenters. And many thanks to our team of organizers, Master of the Zoom, Mark Jacobs, Cindy Shapiro, Rachel McKay, and Sandy Green. Also, much appreciation to Congregation Mishkan Shalom for sponsoring and hosting, and If Not Now for presenting and sponsoring the event. And thank you all for zooming in to the second Voices from the Heart event. And we hope that the evening's focus on reconciliation and a democratic solution for all, as well as ways to get involved in this work, have been meaningful and enlightening. And we'll close out with music from Donna and Tal.